We are now moving on to our second story. And if you haven't heard about this incident that happened with Jordan Neely. So Jordan Neely was a Michael Jackson impersonator in New York City. Also, apparently, he was homeless. And there was an incident on the subway, on the F train in New York. And an ex-Marine took it upon himself to put him in a chokehold. Now, please be advised that Jordan Peely did not physically harm anyone. Apparently, according to witnesses, there were threats that he made, but he didn't hurt anyone. This ex-Marine put him in a chokehold. There were 3 other gentlemen who basically helped hold him down. I think they should be questioned as well. And he died. The ex-Marine has not been arrested. I'm telling you what happened because I don't want to show you the video. I'm not showing that video. But we are going to get into the discussion. Now, shout out to Case Study QB, says man dies after chokehold by fellow New York City passenger. So here we go.
Tonight, the Manhattan DA is investigating a disturbing incident that occurred on the New York City subway system. A man died after he was put into a chokehold by another rider on Monday. A warning, the video that I am about to show you is difficult to watch.
And we're going to pause there, and I'm just going to jump ahead. Like I said, I'm not going to show the video, but you can basically see what's happening here. Jordan is here. There's the guy, and they also blurred out their faces, so this is not easy to see anyway. But this is the ex-Marine who put him in a chokehold. Now you have 3 gentlemen. You have a gentleman here. I think that's a female. We have a gentleman here. There's another gentleman over on this side that you can't really see, but they helped basically hold him down. You see how this guy has his arm? Okay, so I just want to remind you again, he did not physically harm anyone. So let's go on here. I'm just going to speed past this. Okay, here we go.
Attack anyone, according to that witness. Neely was found unconscious and given first aid. When police arrived, he was then transported to a nearby hospital and was pronounced dead later that day. The medical examiner's office has ruled the incident a homicide due to chokehold. So joining me now is New York City Mayor Eric Adams on this and a number of other topics. Mayor Adams, this is something that is really at front of mind for your city right now. It is about both what is happening in the subways, but also about the death of this 30-year-old. What can you tell us about what led up to this incident? What do you know?
Well, right now it's still ongoing, and really our hearts go out to the family and this terrible incident. And the district attorney, as you stated, the ME, medical examiner's office, just ruled the case, and now it's in the hands of the investigators to determine exactly what happened. There's so many unknowns at this time.
So one of the reasons that this story is really hitting a nerve is because this man appeared to be having mental health issues. This is something that you've talked a lot about, but I want to read to you. This is a response from the comptroller, Brad Lander. He tweeted this: New York City is not Gotham. We must not become a city where mentally ill human can be choked to death by a vigilante without consequence. There's also this from Alexandria Ocasio.
Let's pause here for a second and talk about the vigilante aspect of this. There was another incident that happened. This was probably about 2 months ago, where there was a kid breaking into a car and a neighbor came out and shot the kid, killed the kid. They talked about this on Rising. Bree and Robbie talked about this. I think he was 13 years old, the kid or whatever. And it turns out that that wasn't even the neighbor's car. And it brought up this question again about when is it okay to take matters into your own hands versus contacting law enforcement to do their job. And with this particular situation, you have to look at it through that lens. The Marine who just kind of jumped in and put him into a chokehold here, in a sense, it was almost like he was acting as a vigilante, like Batman, or I don't know, the Green Arrow, here comes the Flash, like some vigilante who's just going to come in and save the people and save the day. But you also have to ask yourself, was he physically harming anyone at that time? Now, there are witnesses that say that Jordan Neely, when he was on the train, he screamed that he was hungry and that he threatened to hurt someone. We're hearing different stories from different people. But I think the problem is there is a difference between saying I'm going to do something and doing something. And for that Marine, and as someone who came from a military family, for that Marine, putting him in the chokehold was the intention to put him to sleep. You know how some people say they put you in a sleeper hold, or was it done with the intent to kill? But we have to ask the question, when is it okay to take matters into your own hands? What some people are saying is that if you are on the subway or you're in a situation where you feel unsafe, then it's okay for you to take matters into your own hands. Here's the problem with that. This particular incident, it can set a dangerous precedent. It can give people the impression that that is exactly what they can do. And then you have to define safe. What does it mean to necessarily feel safe? What if you're on the subway and someone gives you what you perceive to be a dirty look, which these things do happen on the subway? Okay, I'm just saying. I lived in New York City. I rode the subway in New York City when I lived there. I lived in Boston. I rode the subway when I lived in Boston. Like I'm about that transportation life, okay? Let's put it that way. I'm about the public transit life, so I'm very familiar. You encounter all different types of people. But here's the thing. What happens if you're on the subway and someone gives you what you perceive to be a nasty look? You don't feel safe. Is it okay then to do what the ex-Marine did? And this is where we have to be careful, because some people will take this and they'll use it to their advantage. Some people, just because they don't like someone who may look a certain way, can use that to their advantage. Oh, well, he got on the train and he was looking at me weird and it made me feel really unsafe. So I took action. This is something we need to think about. We need to think about the precedent. Let's go on.
Cortez, the Democratic Congresswoman, she said Jordan Neely was murdered. What is your response to what they're saying here?
Well, both the Congresswoman and the controller is a citywide leader. And I don't think that's very responsible at the time where we're still investigating the situation. Let's let the DA conduct his investigation with the law enforcement officials. To really interfere with that is not the right thing to do. And I'm going to be responsible and allow them to do their job and allow them to determine exactly what happened here.
Can I just ask you, though,
Yes.
I mean, on the question of vigilantism, what do passengers do in situations like that? Is it appropriate to take matters into your own hands?
Each situation is different. And how a passenger, we have so many cases where passengers assist of the riders. And we don't know exactly what happened here until the investigation is thorough. And each situation is different. I was a former transit police officer, and I responded to many jobs where you had a passenger assisted someone. And so we cannot just blatantly say what a passenger should or should not do in a situation like that. And we should allow
that. I would be very careful with that statement. This piece right here. Remember, he's the mayor.
And each situation is different. I was a former transit police officer, and I responded to many jobs where you had a passenger assisted someone. And so we cannot just blatantly say what a passenger should or should not do in a situation like that. And we should allow the investigation to take its course.
All right. So I want to.
He's the mayor, guys. One of the questions I had in reference to this incident was, where were the transit police? that was one of the questions that I was just wondering, because to me, why weren't they around? Or were they around and they weren't signaled for help? Now, the ex-Marine who put him in that chokehold, he has a name now. He has been identified. His name is Daniel Penny. Daniel Penny is the Subway murderer. Make sure everyone knows this murderer is still out there. Now, Single Moms for Socialism found his name, and here it is here. There's a thread where you can see they pulled up pictures. Several people who went to his high school sent me his name and photos. They recognized him. Here's a yearbook photo from a decade ago, and now they said he always, I think that's supposed to be scared and not sacred them, scared them. So that is his name, is Daniel Penny. And we got to say his name because Jordan Neely's name is all out in the open. All out in the open. So that's who put him in the chokehold. Now, JB said, I hope this information is accurate. I did Google this and look this up. That is his name. They have identified him now. And I want to point out something as well, because they talked about this a little bit on the readout, which I know is Joy Reid. I get it. But there's something that's said here that I think I want people to pay attention to. This is very scary to me. This is very scary that more and more we're hearing these cases. The 16-year-old boy who rings the wrong doorbell and is shot in the head. The teenage girl who turns around in someone's driveway and is shot. Like, it just, when is it okay for people to take matters into their own hands? Let's get into this discussion here. I want to play part of this. Of course, Al Sharpton decided to show up for this as well. Here we go.
Jordan Neely was a 30-year-old man who some New Yorkers may remember. Here are some videos showing Neely as quite the Michael Jackson impersonator who performed around New York City subways, transit hubs, and streets. Neely was also homeless and struggled with mental illness, factors that many believe contributed to why Neely is no longer alive. On Monday, Neely was allegedly yelling and pacing back and forth on a subway train in Manhattan until a stranger, a former Marine, who has not yet been named, put Neely in a chokehold on the subway train.
He's named now.
Train floor. We're about to show the video, and a warning, it is disturbing.
And I'm not going to show that video. You guys don't need to see, I don't want you guys to see that. And then we're going to get into this discussion here.
And Shams Dabaran, a homeless rights and housing activist. Thank you both for being here. Shams, I do want to start with you first. Welcome to the show. Tell me what you make of the way that this young Michael Jackson impersonator was killed.
Ooh. Well, and my brother Sharpton, that's my family right there. We go way back. And you all have to forgive me if I get too emotional. This brother was someone who was failed by the foster care system. It's failed by so many layers of government. This is a brother who, I know what it's like to be a foster child, to be in the streets, and to try and find a way to survive. This is a brother who was trying his best to survive and did it through entertainment, through performing. I knew him from that aspect. Didn't even know he was homeless. But I've seen so many people have to resort to becoming street performers like Brother Jordan was. And when you're that young and you don't have help, it causes so many.
I just want to pause here for a second. I wanted to show you that piece just to give you an idea of where, Jordan was coming. So he was homeless. There was mental illness there that was present as well. And he was not getting the help that he needed. And again, this goes back to the health care issue. Jordan Neely's not alone. He's not the only one that's in this type of situation. The problem is we either don't have the insurance that people need to have in this country where they can seek mental health. Like, mental health treatment is not cheap. It's not cheap to go see a therapist. Like, these things cost. That's part of the problem. But the other part of the problem is that we just don't have health care guaranteed to everybody in this country. Add on top of that, you don't have anywhere to live. You are homeless. Imagine what that could do to you. Now, this is not to make excuses, but what I want to bring it back to is the system that is in place. What he's basically explaining to you is that the system failed. The system failed this guy. And he is not alone. There are other people in that similar situation, going through the foster care system, going from home to home to home. A lot of people sign up to be foster parents, don't want those kids. They just do it for the money, and they don't even use the money to help take care of the child. It's a common story. And so these kids just bounce around from home to home, some of them physically abused, some of them sexually abused. And once they're 18, they're free. Like, the state the state does not have to take care of them anymore once they're 18. So it's just, the problem is not just what happened on that subway. The problem is the system that is in place that allowed it to even get to that point to begin with. Everyone should be guaranteed housing in this country. Everyone should be guaranteed health care in this country. And they're not. And if you're poor, you feel it. You really feel it. And it is very hard to get out of that cycle.
Yeah. I hear you, brother. I do. I hear you. And you know, Rev, it's giving Bernie gets, I have to be honest with you. This whole incident, the fact that this man was not arrested, the fact that we're not getting his name, you know, it's giving Eric Garner. It's giving a lot of things that we really should not have to remember. I want to play for you two pieces of sound. This is Governor Kathy Hochul's first reaction and then her updated reaction to this
Listen
killing.
to this.
People who are homeless in our subways, many of them in the throes of mental health episodes, and that's what I believe are some of the factors involved here. And there's consequences for behavior. I'm really pleased.
So that was her first response. That was Governor Hochul's first response. People are homeless in our subways. There's consequences for behavior. Someone must have spoken to her, because she has now changed her response. So listen to this.
The district attorney is looking into this matter. As I said, there have to be consequences. And so we'll see how this unfolds. But his family deserves justice. It became very clear that, he was not going to cause harm to these other people. And the video of 3 individuals holding him down until the last breath was snuffed out of him, I would say was a very extreme response.
And that's exactly why I did not want to play that video. You can look at it on your own time if you want to. But notice she changed her response. When we talk about the homelessness issue, it's just like, she's like, well, there's homeless people living in our subways. Why are they homeless, Kathy? Why are they living in the subway? How much does it cost to rent an apartment in New York City, Kathy? How much? How many people can afford it? How many roommates do you have to have just to live there? And I'm not talking about people who moved to New York City. I'm talking about people who were born there and grew up there and didn't have a say-so in the matter. How much? One of the most unlivable cities financially in this country today. You can add San Francisco to that list as well, and you go ahead and add Boston too. They never get to that problem. They never get to that bit. Why is the homeless population, excuse me, why is the homelessness population increasing, Kathy? Why? They never get to that part of the problem. They just don't get there. Let's go on a little bit more here and then we'll move on.
Well, somebody must have told her first reaction was inadequate. Reverend Sharpton, your reaction to all of this?
Well, it clearly is something that is above being disturbed. This is, in my judgment, from the film, showing the lack of any kind of civility and a legal reaction. Whether this young man, Brother Jordan, was troubled or not, he should not be sentenced with death. You're talking about a life was taken. And it struck me, which is why I immediately put out a statement. He's on the subway impersonating Michael Jackson, who was close to me. As you know, Michael used to come up to National Action Network. I preached Michael's funeral. And you combine that with Eric Garner, where we have a state law against chokeholds. So what is bothering me is the press is looking into the Jordan family. What happened to Jordan? What happened to his family? What happened to the guy that would choke him for 15 minutes? We don't even know his name.
Okay, so we do know his name now, but what I want to add, it's really interesting that that's coming from Al Sharpton, because Al Sharpton was also one of the people that wanted to give the police more money. He was also one of the people he's talking about chokeholds. He was one of the people that complained about the crime is so bad. I can't go to the store and buy toothpaste because they have it locked up in a case. Man, what is wrong with people? He said that on MSNBC. So it's just, I'm sorry, but you're part of the problem. Al Sharpton is part of the problem. They kill me. They kill me with that. So it's really interesting. It's interesting. But I think Jose here hit the nail on the head. All this tells me is the failure of NYC to provide any kind of actual mental health services to the people. For 9 years, this dude was roaming the subway, all the while his mental health is deteriorating. Because the city is so degraded and collapsed, it creates the conditions for encounters like what we saw with the death of Neely to happen every day. It's the system. Big part of it. Hopefully justice is served. I don't know. But this is where we're at now. Thank you so much for the super sticker, James Starks. Thank you for the super chat, Yonina. The 37th anniversary of the MOVE bombing is coming up. I think it should be covered. This is just a drive-by. Stay aware, stay alive. Thank you so much for that, Yonina. And I'll take the comments on Rockfin, Eric. Thank you for the tip on Rockfin, Dave Burt. And thank you for the tip on Rockfin, Roger. Everyone is being reactive on this and think what should have happened was this or that, but no one is being proactive to understand the source of why this should have never happened to begin with. The problem started with Reagan closing down the government hospitals and mental institutions, kicking all of those patients out onto the street. The second problem is no president since then has reversed it. Third, since we're talking about New York State closures exacerbated in the decade of the Cuomo era, which is why we were so ill prepared for the pandemic. 4, you have low income discrimination of fancy hospitals here in New York State who will take patients with health insurance to get more money and kick the Medicaid recipients to the government hospitals, which are deeply underfunded. 5, the 2 solutions to solve this that they refuse to do is pass the New York Health Act, which has not even been introduced this new term. The New York Health Act outlaws private health insurance. So now, since the government would be paying private and public hospitals, low-income Medicaid recipients can be admitted everywhere. And not to mention now that the government would be paying private hospitals, they can possibly do some audits on them to see if whether or not they're ripping off taxpayers. 6, if we would outlaw private equity from owning housing who engages in rent speculation, driving up rent rates, then we would end chronic homelessness. In other words, Mr. Neely would either have been in a mental institution or in a home off the streets, not having to beg for food, being out there where it's dangerous. Proactive approach, people, not talking about and going to partisan or racial sides once the incident has occurred. God, I wish New Yorkers were able to amend our state constitution using the CBI process. We'd have fixed this already, one and done. Interesting.